ARY Rosenbaum here with another fun-filled episode of that 401k podcast. This week's topic, we're going to talk about my new book, that 401k Plan Provider Handbook, why I wrote it, some of the tales and stories that I know, and the idea behind it, and just my philosophy on plan providers, how they work, and employees, and marketing, and all that stuff. But of course, first things first, go to that 401ksite.com. Further information on all our events. Got a national virtual event at the end of January. We got Chicago, we got Denver, we got Washington, D.C., which is still not on the site yet because we're like 8 months away from it. Please consider attending. $100 a head, $50 each if you're from multiple attendees from the same firm. And of course, the national virtual event is free. You want to sponsor, that's free too if you partake in our national virtual, in providing support for the live events. So let's get to the topic at hand. That 401k Plan Provider Handbook is my fourth book. This is the first book that is primarily not a life story. I think that, I've written 3 books. They all had like a little life story about that, and I don't think they sold well because I think the audience has said, Ari, we really don't care about your story. Now, I wrote my first book, I want to say in 2012, then I wrote the next book in 2016, 2017, and then I think 8 years went on, and Full Circle came out just this last June, and, got my juices flowing, and that Full Circle was a book I wanted to write for like 5 years, and I couldn't get it together. The idea behind Full Circle was I wanted a book of like, these are my views, this is like sayings that I had. I did touch upon in the second book, like Ariisms, a lot of my famous phrases and the stories behind it. And I couldn't write that book for a long time. I had the worst writer's block. And then 2 things happened. One is people think I'm crazy, but in April I met Drew Brees at a card show in New Jersey, Edison, New Jersey. And I met Drew, and I simply asked him, I said, do you think the Chargers ever regret trading you? Because, people forget, I think he was a 2nd or 3rd round pick with the Chargers. I think he had an elbow issue or whatnot, so he was out for the year. And Chargers originally drafted Eli Manning, and then they made the trade with the Giants with Phillip Rivers and all that stuff. So Phillip Rivers is going to be their starting quarterback. Drew was still out for a year. He was a hot commodity, and he went with the Saints and won a Super Bowl. And to this day, the Chargers still have not won a Super Bowl. When I asked Drew Brees the question, he said to me, well, in the end, it all worked out. And I thought, wow, that's really prophetic. And my wife's like, oh, that was a throwaway line. It's just like, oh, and to me, it was so goddamn profound. I mean, it just opened up my eyes, and I'm like, that's my life. In the end, it all worked out. In the end, all the nonsense, like, that's what Full Circle was all about. It was just all the nonsense. And I enjoyed writing that book because it was very, very cathartic. Maybe I sold, I don't know, 12 copies or something like that. But it was the greatest therapy session in my life. That's how I saw it. And it just made me, it was like taking my life story and, and business, a lot of business stuff and the nonsense. And it was just the negativity that I felt when things weren't going my way. And just like, in the end, it all worked out. And then the second thing that, again, people think I'm crazy. The second thing that really got me to writing that 3rd book was the Mission Impossible trailers for the last movie. Where sometimes I didn't feel like I was Ethan Hunt, but everything led to this. Everything I ever did led to this. And the idea that our lives are the sum of our choices. And I made some bad choices, but in the end, it all worked out. And I think of my mother sometimes, and if you read the book, she made choices, and I I know that I can sense that she's not happy with the choices that she made. And that's life. And I have no regrets. And, that's what Luther said to Ethan. I have no regrets, neither should you. And I don't have any regrets. But that's what led to me, like I said, okay, well, I'm going to do this book. And then I'm like, what can I do next? And then I just wanted to do a 401k plan provider handbook, which is just my philosophy on how plan providers should act and things that they constantly forget. I started my practice in 2010. I've read some books on, how to do a law practice, how to do PR stuff and whatnot. But a lot of my philosophy is just based on rational thinking. I've been very, very lucky in the sense that, I can sense things. There are times where I'm really wrong on things. I jokingly say two biggest business things I was completely wrong about. I thought Apple opening up their stores was idiotic. I mean, I said, why would they compete against CompUSA? That doesn't make any sense. And of course, Apple stores make a load of money. And the second thing I thought was silly was Amazon selling anything more than books and DVDs and music. I thought that was insanity. I was obviously wrong about that. I should have bought Amazon at $16 a share when it was, I think in 2001, that was the price of it. But outside of that, I think I got a pretty good track record. And that's really because I just think rationally. When I worked for Harvey Berman as a lawyer affiliated with Mobius Tech, and Mobius Tech was being bought, and CBiz was buying it and it was going to become CBiz Retirement Services, Inc. Dan Sussman, who was actually the partner who was leading the company, and he was leading us off a cliff, he announced the deal and he says, you guys have nothing to worry about. And I remember talking to my dad. We did a walk, or, we were doing these, power walks after work. And I said to him, when someone tells you not to worry, that's the time to worry. And needless to say, that transaction blew up in all our faces when CBiz sold our business to BISIS, which is a really terrible situation. But Drew Brees would say it all worked out in the end. So much of the things you saw in this business, you could see it a mile away. When we were dealing with fee disclosure, I was working for producing TPA, and we were switching plans from the Fidelity 279 platform to 251, trying to tell them that we were cutting their fees, but not disclosing that we were making more money in revenue sharing. I thought that was problematic. I thought that was just wrong. I'm a big fan of disclosure. You're not in trouble if you disclose everything. Tell everybody the truth, you'll be okay. Except I think if you're cheating on your wife, telling your wife you're cheating on her is probably not going to help you. But, at least the honesty is there, I guess. I suppose. I don't know. But I thought that was problematic. I thought that day would come. There would be a day coming to an end that nature where a plan provider could make indirectly a lot of money on a plan sponsor would end one day. It didn't make any sense. I know George Miller in Congress tried to put fee disclosure as part of law, and too many Wall Street interests put a stop to it. So it eventually took the Department of Labor the power to do it. And in 2006 and 2007, when I was predicting the end of all of this, we had a administrator, Dave. He thought I was crazy. He was saying, "Oh, Ari's full of it. That's not going to happen." And Dave, I recently wrote an email to Dave or a message on Facebook. When I left that TPA to join a law firm, I said some disparaging things about the TPA that I worked for. And somebody who was a friend of mine on Facebook divulged that to my old bosses, and that caused me a little bit of a headache. And I can't prove it's him, but he's the only person who I work with who befriended me pretty soon after. So I just, after, because of Full Circle, I sent him a little message and I said, somebody did this to me. And it did, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because it put me on a course. It put me on a setting that just like made me that much bigger because it changed the trajectory of everything. Because it caused me grief at that law firm, I was gone from there. Not because of that, but for a whole host of other things that, we talk about in Full Circle. But it put me on my own path. And, I don't think I was meant to do this and have my own practice, but it put me on a different trajectory. And I said it didn't accomplish what it was set out to do, and that TPA no longer exists. Because going after me at the time, as disclosed in the first book, put them on a self-destruct sequence, something out of like Star Trek 3. And that was the end of it. And I don't have any hard feelings because, I just want him to know that, he's stuck in this job and he can't go anywhere else because he's terrible at what he does. And I'm on a different path. And I'm on a different trajectory. But, so much of what we see in the retirement plan business, we can foresee what will happen. Just I've been very, very lucky that I can, write these articles and not proselytize, but have an opinion, people to use that opinion to get business for themselves. It gets me referrals here and there. It worked out. When I was at that Fakakta law firm, it would take 6 months to get an article approved, 3 levels of partnership. That's no way to build a business. I write an article a week that you see on JD Super. I write 6 blog posts a week in addition. That constant communication. There is the most cost-effective advertising there is. I don't like to spend money to pay $10,000 to have a little literature table at an event because to me $10,000 is a lot of money. I should think about going and doing that one day, see how it works. But I've always been against it because I hate spending money like that, spending money on advertising. And that's part of the book too, where I joke when I started my own practice, there was this cottage industry of people that wanted to separate me from my money and to sell me stuff I didn't need. I didn't need to pay AT&T for an SEO search thing because, plan sponsors don't know that they need an ERISA attorney. And of course, the articles help my recognition and whatnot in this business. And so much of it is based on, writing articles and helping plan providers out with communication. And that was the whole idea of it. When I was at that Fakakta law firm and I couldn't sell to our existing clientele because the partners there were, protecting their client list like it was the secret formula for Coca-Cola. I said the only other way I could do it is I'll write articles that plan providers could use to recruit and maintain their clients. And when something arises and they need a ERISA attorney, they're going to call me. That's just the nature of it. That's, our business is a relationship-driven business, and that's not something that you should ever, ever forget. It's all about connection. It's the same thing if you treat other plan providers poorly, it's like the old adage about peeing in a pool. It's going to follow you, which, that's not reality, but of course, treating other plan providers poorly will. But that's really how I see things. It's important to communicate, put out newsletters, social media. I think that that's extremely important. I had I have a gift in the sense that I was a very poor legal writer. Still to this day, I think I'm a very poor legal writer. And I think that that's the fault of my training at the Stony Brook Statesman, where, you had to be quick, concise, because when, it's 8 o'clock at night, you don't have a newspaper, at 6 in the morning, you're going to have a 16-page newspaper done twice a week. You can't think you don't have time to go on and be verbose. And I've been, very lucky that I could write in a language that plan sponsors and other plan providers can understand, because my legal writing's crap. Uh, Other attorneys are the opposite, where, they write in ERISA ease. And I think it's important to talk to your audience in a language that they can understand. But I think the most important lesson from the book, one of the most important lessons that you'll learn, is my philosophy about employees. Employees are the most important asset that most plan providers forget. The idea of game theory is very, very important. Game theory is what I know, Professor Nash, A Beautiful Mind, that's where I first learned about it. It's about rational decision making. My use of game theory is I will present something to somebody and I want to guess what their answer will be. And too often, plan providers take their employees for granted. I worked at a union law firm, and I remember two partners were caught saying bad things about associates, like they should be grateful for what they got, and this and that. Everybody has feelings. The problem that union law firms never understood, and the problem that I think employers never understand, between employers and employees, it's like a tug of war match. No employee ever thinks they make too much. No employer ever thinks they pay their employees too little. And in the middle, there has to be some sort of arrangement. If employees think they're being taken advantage of, they feel they're being treated poorly, they will move somewhere else. And that's when I left a TPA shop. I said, happy employees never leave. Unhappy employees, like me, do. Could they have done anything to make me happy? Yeah, I mean, I'm not, I am malcontent, but there's certain ways where I could have been happy. It's really hard to find good employees, especially now these days. I mean, colleges and high schools and all that stuff over the last 25 years have really cut back in the quality of that education. I think it's more politics and less practical skills. My two kids, both high school graduates, they're in college. I don't think either of them can tell time. So much, it's not about teaching anymore. It's about feelings and nonsense, whatever. And I think that CPAs are not going to find as skilled employees they can do right out of college. Training is very, very important. But losing employees, I worked at a place at that TPA shop where I said, our front door should be a revolving door. We got so many people coming in and out. That wastes time, that wastes money. To replace me at a law firm, but I don't even know what a headhunter makes now. But I think in those days they were making $25,000 or something to replace somebody. And maybe sometimes that extra $2,000 or $3,000 in a pay raise would have avoided that person from leaving. Or a safe harbor contribution, whatever it is to make an employee happy, to feel like they matter. Listen, at that TPA shop, I'll never forget every mistake you make. It's you're terrible. When a client sends a great letter about what great work you did, you're not told what a great job you did. It gets blown off because you were supposed to do that. Which reminds me of Robin from the Howard Stern show, where she says, Sully wasn't a hero because he did his job. That was the most successful ditch in aviation history. That was incredible. He's a hero. Most other pilots might have gone back and tried to go back to LaGuardia, and they would have crashed. I think it's important to value employees. I think it's important to value clients. Be honest and upfront with them. Say you're sorry when things go wrong. It's a book really of 27 years of experience, which is more than half my life now, about rational decision making, about being courteous, about being a decent human being. And yeah, it sounds simple. Well, I'm a decent human being. human being, or I try to be, but a lot of people aren't. We see those people. I'm like Larry David at times, and I always think that the same people who, we just had a snowstorm recently in New York, and the same people who have SUVs or whatever, cars with, big roofs, the same people who don't clear those roofs off of ice are probably the same people who don't return carts to the cart corral. It's the idea that, it's a simple concept. My biggest problems in life were dealing with narcissists. That's been in every book. I can't deal with them because I care and think about what other people think, and narcissists do not. They don't care about what other people think. Just had a issue with a friend not too long ago. She was the good friend, and she'd be the one person check our mail and all that stuff when we were away. And last trip we went, we're looking on the cameras, and she's taking one of her friends to look around our house doing a tour. My wife was upset about it, but the friend I guess I could see your point, and then she wrote us off because her feelings mattered, but ours did not. The world doesn't revolve around you, and I think that that's a central part of the book. There are other people involved. It's the same, again, talking about people who don't, return carts to the corral. They're the same people using speakerphones at Costco or in the doctor's office. I really don't need to hear your conversation. There are other people around. I mean, there are times where, if I gotta use the camera or whatever at the same time, and I don't know how to use it, and I apologize when I have to use the speakerphone. But again, if you understand that there are people around you and that your actions can affect them, I think you're ahead of the game, because a lot of people just don't. That Fakakta law firm, Lois thought, listen, the way I was going to do things was wrong. She still thought the ideas that you're going to make deals on the golf course or at lunch, those days are over. I had the practice that I could get clients from around the country, and that social media was going to be the way. And we had a guy who was the head of the advertising committee at the time. He was not a partner; he was an associate. Drew all a dime business, and he's like, "Oh well, posting on LinkedIn, that's advertising. To do social media correctly, it's not advertising." All the time, you see people on LinkedIn, all of a sudden they want to friend you and they want to sell you something. That's not the way to go. It's all about, LinkedIn to me is about building your reputation and connecting with people on LinkedIn. One of my dear friends in this business, James Holland, love the guy to death. He connected to me after he saw my comments about fee disclosure. He called me up one day. I remember where he called me up. I work from home, and I think I was sitting in bed when he called me because I was working with my computer. I remember that first phone call. And James wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy, or somebody he can trust. And trust develops over time. I think that people very, very, very much forget that. And that's why I'll never understand these advisors that right off the back, who's managing your money? Or, I work with other attorneys. Listen, moron. I've been working in this business for 27 years. I know hundreds and hundreds of advisors. If I have to have someone manage my money, who am I going to use? The guy I know for 20 years, or this schmuck who just, sent me a LinkedIn message? And that's important with who you work with. The two people I know who went to federal prison for stealing, Matt Hutchinson and Jeff Ritchie, they got away with it for some time because people didn't verify who they were ahead of time. Jeff Ritchie is somebody who got banned from trading by the SEC. That's a sign. Matt Hutchinson was making claims that were not true. That he was working for CalPERS, that he was one of the founders for Brightscope. That stuff was not true. And you got to verify who you're dealing with, and that that's trust and all that kind of stuff. So that's really important tools, and that's in the book as well. So I think I've gone on more than my 20 minutes that I usually do, but I figured I would with this book because it's my philosophy, it's my experience, and just insight on how to run a business and how to build a business on a shoestring. You know, and I've been very very lucky, uh, but I've made my own luck. I don't, you make your own luck, and that's really it. So January 6th, a couple days after this, you'll be able to buy the book, paperback Kindle, and of course, that401ksite.com for further information on all our events. And tune in next week for another fun filled episode of that 401k podcast. Take care. Bye.